Yeah, and just really seeing how this feels today on Monday morning after the half-term break. So letting the knees tilt side to side and keeping things easy, particularly as you just start to build up a sense of how your body is feeling today. No need to push anything. So there's no need to push anything at this point. There's no need to push anything at any point. That's very nice. So noticing how you feel around the back of your pelvis, into your hip joints, perhaps the lower back. Good. And just a couple more times do this movement and notice how you feel your weight shift side to side across the back of your pelvis. So towards the left, towards the right. And then what I'd like you to do is settle in the center, keep your knees bent, and then see how it feels to start to tilt your pelvis on the floor towards your head and away from your head. So now we're sort of tilting the pelvis up and down rather than side to side. So in one orientation, when we tip our pelvis towards our face, our lower back flattens out and makes a bit more contact with the floor. In the other orientation, when we tilt our pelvis away from our head, our lower back arches off the floor a little bit. And just notice how these movements feel to you today. And keep them easy, and particularly if one of them feels, if you feel, oh, it feels a bit tight in my lower back going in either direction, just don't push it. Just got the bin lorry out there. And then from this little movement, you're going to start to move a bit more, and you're going to start to roll up and down into a few easy bridge poses. Yeah, Linda, you might want your feet slide slightly wider apart, I think, possibly. Yeah, that's it. And so just in a very easy way, how does it feel to perhaps let, if you know, your pelvis tip towards your head, and then as well as the bottom of the pelvis coming off the floor, the whole of the pelvis comes up and some of your vertebrae too. And then when you're placing your spine back onto the floor, this is the time to see if you can place your spine down vertebrae by vertebrae. But what I'd like you to do mainly is just the sort of rolling up and down, sort of picking your spine and pelvis up off the floor, placing your spine and pelvis back down onto the ground. And maybe 3 or 4 times. Oh, very nice to see. See, Atticus has now woken up. Good. So maybe one more time, letting your pelvis roll up and down and just having a sense of how this feels. And my plan is that we will come back to this, right, if things go well, right at the end of the class. So what I'd like you to do now is, once your pelvis comes back on the floor, onto the floor, is then fold your knees into your chest and hold around the top of your knees. And do a little bit of rocking from side to side across the back of your pelvis. If you like, if you prefer just to hold your knees and have a couple of quiet breaths there, that you can do. A little bit of rocking from side to side. That's nice. Good. Otto's reappeared on his cushion. He's obviously not on my bed. And then pausing in the center, and you can take your legs up towards the ceiling and give them a shake out. You can add your arms in if you like as well. It's completely up to you. Good. Very nice. And then from here, you can bring your knees back in towards your chest, bring your feet back onto the floor. Perhaps you'd like to just lie long for a moment, lengthen your legs out on the ground, maybe roll your legs or bounce your knees. Yes, if you haven't got a cat in the way. So that's it. And from here, when you're ready, you might want to fold your knees back in towards your chest, because we're going to roll onto our side. And then we're briefly going to come over into Cobbler Pose and pinwheel before we come on into standing. So as usual yesterday, after a break, I was planning this class and I was adding in far too many things. So we'll see how the timing goes. So I sort of was readjusting at the end. So lean back onto your arms, bring your legs into Cobbler Pose and just see how it feels. And of course it can feel, you know, it can feel quite tight here on the inner thighs, particularly depending on what we've been doing. So just, yeah, lean back, let the legs be heavy. And then from here, we'll come on into pinwheels. So let one knee come on top of the other knee and let this top leg slide back. And then just a bit of circling here. That's it, good. So we've slid the top leg back, very nice, good. So a bit of circling here. And so obviously we do pinwheel a lot, but it's so helpful because we're doing these two movements in our hip joints. We've got this internal rotation, this external rotation. We can circle a bit. And as I'm sure I've said many times, I just always, you know, I tend to do this every day, and I find it so helpful for my pelvis, for my hip joints, for any tension and tightness around the sort of middle of my body. So from circling, we're going to turn towards the knee that's going out to the side, and we're going to fold into a forward bend and just have maybe 2 or 3 cycles of breath here. So where we gather our attention into our breathing, and it might be that our elbows can come to the ground, or it's maybe our hands. Some of you may be able to bring your forehead to the ground. And once you're settled, just let yourself have a few quiet cycles of breath here, feeling the weight of your body settled on the ground, letting your breath come in, letting your breath leave you. And then we'll walk our hands in towards us. And we'll come back into Cobbler Pose. So if you lean on the arm, it's the leg you just folded over, and then you can slide that back leg on top. Open your legs out into Cobbler Pose again. A little bit of rocking from side to side. You could do, sometimes that's helpful. Yes, you can lean on your arms and do a little bit of rocking. So anything that just, again, helps the hips to undo. Your guide too. So the same thing, let me come over. So I'm leaning on this arm. Let one knee come over. Do a bit of circling. Okay, so it's just told me my internet connection is unstable, but I can still see you all, so I hope you can still see me. So we've come into side 2 of pinwheel. That's it, good. And a bit of circling inside 2 of pinwheel. And then the same thing, we'll fold over this knee that's going out to the side, and we'll have a few breaths here, just letting ourselves settle down, trying to give the weight of our body down through the leg, down into the ground, and feeling our breath come in, feeling our breath leaving us. A pinwheel's always a good place where we can sort of sigh a little bit more. So yes, if you haven't folded over your leg that's going out to the side, please do so. Good. Pinwheel's a good place to sort of let go of tension, to think about the shoulders softening, to maybe have a bigger sighing breath or two. And again, in your own time, walk your hands back in towards you. Lean back onto your arms this time and just let your legs lengthen out on the floor in front of you and give them a little bit of a roll. So we're going to come up into standing now. So just come up however's comfortable. We're going to do a few simple things in standing and then a bit of a sequence, which will take us back onto hands and knees. So. Yes, that's it. Socks off. Not quite as, I think the last class I was teaching, it was so cold. So this has warmed up a bit since then. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is just loose swinging twist, feeling the whole of ourselves in movement. That's nice. Just letting ourselves arrive in standing. You're still feeling like my children were this morning, half asleep. I think one of them still in her pajamas. That's one of the benefits of online schooling, especially for teenagers. Yes, swinging your arms, slapping them on your body, just helping to wake yourself up a bit if you're still feeling not fully awake. Good. Couple more times, swinging the arms. Good. Okay, we'll let this go. And we're going to do a couple of just quite simple balances to get a sense, yeah, I suppose to start to bring our awareness to our feet. So the first thing you're going to do is just this movement where we come forwards onto the balls of both feet. You might even hear my feet clicking. Yeah, so shifting our weight forwards and then back again. And as we come forwards onto the balls of our feet, we want to try and feel that our weight is spread across the whole of the ball of the foot. That it's not just in the base of the big toe. And if we look forwards rather than down at our feet, we can just try to feel, how does this feel? So do this a couple more times and then we'll stay and up on the balls of the feet and we'll stay here for a little bit of a balance. So perhaps the next time you come up, see if you can stay there. See if you can float your arms up. And just have a couple of breaths, letting your shoulders soften and drop. That's it. So see if you can stay balancing. Let your arms come up. Have a few breaths there, staying quiet through the shoulders and the front ribs. Good. And it's fine if you fall down, just come back up again. Good. When we come down from here, we're going to let the heels come down and we're going to sweep our arms down into a forward bend. And it might be you want your elbows on your thighs, or it might be you want to go all the way into a forward bend. Letting your head go, letting your arms go. Good. And just see how it feels to be in a forward bend. So we've been doing some of these movements lying down, this sort of lengthening out through the lower back. But it's obviously different in standing. So have a couple of breaths here. And then as you exhale, you're going to sink into your heels, roll back up into standing. And you can walk your hands up the fronts of your legs if that's better for your lower back. And when you come back up into standing, just settle with your feet a little distance apart. And then close your eyes. And I'd just like you to do a little bit of swaying from side to side with your eyes closed. And we're seeing how it feels to take our weight over one leg and over the other leg. So we're going to come into a very sort of simple standing balance on one leg in a moment. And as you sway from side to side, just have a sense of how does it feel to take your weight over one leg and over the other. And you're going to choose in a moment which leg you want to stand on first. So at this point you could be seeing, is one side a little bit easier? And then open your eyes and settle in the center for a moment and bring your hands into prayer pose. So we're going to sort of settle our hands in prayer pose and rest our thumbs on our breastbone. And this usually sort of helps us feel a bit more steady. We're going to rock our weight then onto the foot we've chosen to stand on first. All we're going to do with the other foot is bring it to stand on the standing foot. Okay, and then see how that feels. And can we settle down here? And of course, our foot on the floor is going to probably wobble around a little bit. If we get very wobbly, we can always bring our other toes back onto the floor. If you feel really steady, you could try, if you like, taking your arms up. Just see what that's like. You don't have to. Take your arms up. You could take your arms wide at your side. Good. And sometimes I find if I'm doing something with my arms, it does help my foot quieten down. And you could also end up with your hands back in prayer pose, or you could have stayed with your hands in prayer pose the whole time. Good. Very nice. And then come down and have a little shake out. So yes, I always think it's interesting. So sometimes I say it's a very simple balance, but when it's very simple, sometimes actually our foot can start to feel more wobbly because that's our focus of attention. So yeah, have a little shake out, then bring your hands back into prayer pose, thumbs resting on your breastbone, letting your weight shift onto your other foot now, and the foot we just stood on comes to stand on top of that foot. And then just decide, it might be that you want to just stay here with your hands in prayer pose, keep things quite quiet. Might be, yes, that you want to take your arms into some of those other positions, that's fine. You could, If you like, take your arms up, keep the shoulders relaxed and soft. You could take your arms wide out to the side, which is interesting because sometimes we always think this is like tightrope walkers do to help you balance, but it's quite tiring for the arms. And of course, we can bring the hands back into prayer pose in front of us. And again, as I was saying, yes, sometimes this having a different focus for the arms can actually let our foot quieten down a little bit. Good. Come down, have a little shake out. And we're going to come to the backs of our mat now, and we're going to do a sequence. So taking us down onto the floor, doing some things on hands and knees. And we'll do this 3 times. Each time it'll be slightly different. So come to the back of your hat, your mat. Have your hands in prayer pose in front of your chest. And we're going to let a breath come in. As you exhale, take your arms down and then up. Let a breath come in. And as you exhale, we're going to be curling forwards. Elbows maybe coming to the knees and thighs, and then down into a forward bend for a breath or 2. And from your forward bend, you're then going to be walking your hands forwards into dog pose. And of course, you can let your heels come up. They don't need to stay down. You can have a couple of breaths in dog. We won't stay here too long. Just see how it feels. Obviously, bending one knee, bending both knees. And then from your dog pose, come down onto hands and knees and settle there with your hands under your shoulders and your knees under your hips. And the first thing we're going to do here is actually just turn one at a time. You're going to come onto the back of your hand to lengthen out your wrist and keep most of your weight in the other arm, yeah? So do this to each hand in turn, yeah? And we're going to come back to this a few times throughout the sequence. And then settle your hands down on the floor, your palms on the floor as normal, and come to some cat movements. So rounding your back and dipping your spine. So these are very much coming back to those movements of the pelvis we were doing on our backs. That's a bit like cats. So we tip round our back to the ceiling. We dip our spine down to the floor, and we see how this feels in around the back of the pelvis. How does it feel in the lower back? How does it feel moving up into the spine between the shoulder blades? And just carry on with these a few more times, rounding and dipping. You're also, when you like, going to add in some tail wagging movements. So you can either do that by wagging your tail, moving your pelvis from side to side, feeling one side of your body shorten as the other side lengthens, or you could do this by swinging your lower legs from side to side. So if that works better for you, you can do any of these variations really. And when you've done a little bit of your tail wagging, side bending movements, come back to a few cat movements again. So rounding and dipping of your spine, and sometimes by, as we know, by doing our tail wagging movements, it can then make the cat movements feel a little bit more free. And then you're going to, from a rounded up cat, rounding your back to the ceiling, staying rounded, rock your hips back over your heels into child pose. And just have a couple of breaths in child pose, or kneeling if you prefer. And I've just realised I haven't got no water. I'm going to quickly grab some while you're breathing in child. Okay, and then from child pose or kneeling, you're going to come back onto hands and knees, but this time make sure you're towards the front of your mat. And again, you're going to do this movement where you come onto the back of each hand in turn. And again, as I said, I've got more of my weight in my other hand. Yeah, so there's more of my weight in my hand that's sort of got its palm on the floor. I'm just doing that sort of movement for my wrist, so in both hands. Okay, and then from here, being more at the front of our mats, we're going to come on into plank pose. So your shoulders over your wrists. We're going to lengthen one leg back behind you, add the other leg in, have a few breaths in plank. And from plank, we will go on into dog pose and then into a forward bend and up into standing. So when you're ready from your dog, you can then send your hips up towards the ceiling. It might feel like quite a long dog pose, and you might then like to walk your feet in a little bit. That's up to you. Have a few breaths in dog pose, bending each knee in turn or bending both knees together. Big exhalations are good in dog. And then from dog pose, you're going to be walking your hands in towards your feet. So you end up in a forward bend with all of your weight in your feet, letting your head go. From here, we'll touch the backs of our hands together. We'll roll up into standing, trailing the hands straight up the front of the body, straight up to the ceiling. You can be long and tall for a moment, and then exhale, take your arms in a big circle all the way down into prayer pose. Good. So we're going to go back down to the floor again through in a moment. So hands in prayer pose, let a breath come in, exhaling, taking your arms down and then up, long and tall here. Let the breath come in and then rounding down into a forward bend, elbows resting on your thighs if you like. And again, from your forward bend, walking your hands forwards into dog pose. Couple of breaths in dog. And then from dog pose, let your knees come down onto the ground. And we're going to be stepping 1 foot forwards, not as far as we do for a lunge to start with. So we're coming into this twisting movement where we've got 1 foot stepped forwards and the heel is under your knee. And you can see my knee is under my pelvis. And if I was to turn this way, I've got a little bit sideways distance. I haven't got my foot in front of my thigh because I'd be wobbling around all over the place. And we're going to be doing this twist, which we worked on at various times over the last few months. So we turn towards the front leg. The back arm, we can sort of give that arm away, or it can rest on the back of our pelvis. And this hand sort of comes to rest on the opposite thigh. And we're trying to feel really wide across the front of our chest. And this sort of movement, we're moving into some of that tightness in between the shoulder blades in the upper back. Good. But it's important to try and keep relaxing the back arm in particular. Dropping the back shoulder, not letting it come up towards our ears. Good. Very nice. Fantastic. And then from there, turn to face forwards again. And you're going to fold forwards over that front leg. And then we can tuck our toes under in our back foot and walk the foot back so we come into lunge now. And we'll have a few breaths in lunge. Make sure your front foot is well planted on the floor. When I looked at my foot, it was off at a strange angle, so I adjusted it. So the front foot's planted on the floor, our knee is over our heel. It's fine if your heel stays down, if you'll need to come forwards over your foot, that's fine. But you don't really want your knee behind your heel. Have a couple more breaths there. Giving the weight of your pelvis down to the ground, trying to feel nice and planted through your front foot. It's quite good to tuck the toes under in the back foot when we're in lunge, just to really work those toes. And then we are going to ease back out of lunge, untucking those back toes, keeping our chest close to our front thigh, and then looking back behind us. So the chest stays close to the front thigh. We look back towards our back foot, this easing back out of lunge, which also gives us a bit of a stretch through the back of the front leg. The hamstring stretch there. Okay, and we're going to then step the other foot forwards. I'm going to turn around, otherwise I won't be able to see you, but you don't need to do that. So you're going to step the other foot forwards, so we can do this twist. So again, remember, you've got a little bit of sideways distance. Yeah, so you're not feel like you're teetering around. Front knee over your heel, back knee under your pelvis, turning towards this front leg. Trying to give away the back arm, or just really let that back shoulder soften and drop. Hand could rest on the pelvis. This hand can rest here. And so we're trying to have this sense of being wide and open across the front of the chest. Sending this shoulder back and down. Maybe noticing how it feels in the upper back between the shoulder blades. Good, very nice, lovely. And of course we are working a little bit into that front foot to feel steady here. Lovely. And then we'll untwist. And again, we'll fold over the front foot. Check that your foot is well planted. And then you can tuck your back toes under, walk the back leg away into lunge. And as I said, if it's possible for you to keep your back toes tucked under, it can be quite a good stretch for those toes. I think it comes to this time of year, I always start thinking my feet have been in shoes for months and they're feeling a bit stiff. So anything we can do to work the feet a little bit. Good. So a few more breaths in this second lunge. And then from here, we'll be easing backwards. So at this point, we can untuck those back toes, keep our chest close to our thigh, rock back. So we're looking back behind us, feeling a bit of a stretch maybe through the middle of the front leg thigh, back of the thigh, the hamstrings. Good. And then from there, we're going to come onto hands and knees. And one more time, come to this movement where you come onto the back of each hand in turn. And remember, you're not having to bear loads of weight there. You're just really thinking about lengthening out your wrist in the other direction. Once you've done that on both sides, you might want to take your hands a bit wider apart because we're going to come into dog pose. And we're going to work into our feet a little bit in this dog pose. So you can rock your hips back over your heels, come up into dog. And in this dog, I'd like you to do the one where you're rolling 1 foot at a time. So you're coming up onto the underside of the toes, the tip of the toes, and then onto the top of the toes. And really lengthening through the front of your ankle. And this is, I find, such a helpful movement for really, yes, moving the toes in all directions. So a few times rolling through your toes, trying to find as much movement as possible in this dog pose. And then you could also have a couple of quiet breaths in dog where you're not rolling through your toes if you prefer. And then from your dog, walking your hands in towards your feet into a forward bend. And give yourself a few breaths in your forward bend just to see how it feels. And then obviously rolling up into standing. So when you're ready, backs of your hands together. You roll up into standing. That's very nice. We take our arms up to the ceiling, beautiful. We feel long and tall. And we exhale, hands around, back into prayer pose. Very nice. So one more time, we're going to go down to the floor. We're going to do some other things and then come back up again. So last time at the back of your mat, hands in prayer pose. Let a breath come in as you exhale, take your arms down and then up. Feel long and tall and then rounding down into a forward bend. So it is quite nice to see how your forward bend feels for a couple of breaths. Maybe the back of the legs feel that they're lengthening out. Maybe the lower back starting to feel happier. And then walking your hands on into dog pose. Having a few breaths in dog. Again, it might be, as we've come in and out of dog pose a few times, it might be that you feel you can just sort of be in dog and breathe, feel the movement of your breath. Also, if you need to bend your knees, walk on the spot, that's absolutely fine. And from dog, we'll come down onto hands and knees. So we're going to revisit a little bit more of cat and tail wagging here, because I've always, the more I do of these things, the better they, the better my body feels. So on hands and knees, see how it feels to come back to some cat movements, rounding your back to the ceiling, dipping your spine down to the floor. Good. Very nice. And come back to some tail wagging movements as well and see how they feel. And we'll come back into child pose just for a couple of breaths. Again, from coming to child by rounding your back to the ceiling and then staying rounded to rock your hips back over your heels. And just give yourself a breath or two in child, or if you prefer in kneeling, just really so you can take the weight off your hands and wrists for a moment. Let the breath come in, let the breath leave you. Good. So come back up onto hands and knees now. And again, you can just one hand and then the other come onto the back of your hand. That's it. Once you've done that, we're going to come into a slightly longer hands and knees position. So you're going to bring your hands further forwards than your shoulders. And you're going to just start to see how does it feel to not necessarily go all the way into face up dog. We will be doing that, but you can start to ease forwards. So how does it feel to start to take your weight forwards into your arms and let your pelvis come forwards? At any point you can also, of course, go all the way back. Take your pelvis back. And just do this a few more times. It's quite nice to rock all the way back towards a child pose. You don't need to let your elbows go onto the floor, but you can take your pelvis back. And see how this feels. Good. And then what I'd like you to do, you might want to just take the weight off your hands and wrists for a moment. So perhaps sit back onto your heels or come into this up kneeling, give your hands a shake out, because we're going to do a couple more face up dogs, and you can choose either to use your tail wagging movement or your cat movement. So with this longer hands and knees, you could do a bit of wagging your tail back to child and forwards into face up dog. So that can be nice. Or you can use your cat movements. So again, with the longer hands and knees, rounding your back, rocking your hips back over your heels, keeping rounded, then to travel forwards, bringing your pelvis forwards and then opening out into face up dog. So perhaps, just choose which one you feel more drawn to today. And 2 or 3 times moving forwards into face up dog, either using your rounded up cat or your tail wagging. Good. Okay, one more time. Or a bit of both. You can also move between the two. Very nice. Okay. And then, yes, I think maybe just, again, a couple of quiet breaths in kneeling or child pose to give your hands a rest. That looks lovely. Well done. And then when you're ready, you're going to be moving through dog pose, forward bend, back up into standing. And it might be nice with this bit of the movement to really think of it as a sort of as a movement rather than staying particularly long in any of the poses. So from dog, then walking the hands in towards your feet, into your forward bend, and then touching the backs of your hands together and rolling up into standing. Very nice. Good. Little shake out. Now we're going to come into another balance. We're going to come into tree pose, any variation you like. But I thought we would, rather than prayer pose, we'll do this lotus bud mudra. So I'm just showing you where I've got sort of space. I'm not touching my palms. I'm touching the base of my palms. This lotus bud mudra. We can also take our arms. Otto, what are you doing? Yes. So what you're going to obviously decide is which leg you're going to stand on, and also which variation of tree pose you'd like to do. So it could be your foot on your ankle. You could bring your foot a bit higher up, so your heel's just above your knee, or you could bring your foot higher up on your thigh. So yes, first decisions. So first of all, it's which leg are we going to stand on? And then, so you can by all means, bring your hands into the lotus bud mudra before you've come into your balance, if you don't have to catch your ankle. But if you want to catch your ankle, you obviously need to do that first. And then we're bringing our hands into, yes, do use a wall if you need to. We're bringing our hands into this beautiful lotus bud mudra, where we touch the bases of the palms, the thumbs and the little fingers, and the pads of the other fingers, but there's space between the hands. So we create this bud shape, which is particularly at this time of year when it's starting to get those little hints of spring. And then from here, you can stay here, but if you want to, you can also let your arms grow up into tree and have a few breaths here. And then we can come back to the lotus bud mudra. Let the arms come up, let the shoulders soften. That's nice, good. You can take your arms wide if you like, that's lovely. And then it's also, yes, nice to finish a feeling of gathering in, bringing our hands back into this beautiful bud shape at our heart. The sense of the promise of spring. Good. Very nice. Do come down. So it's always with balances, it's interesting to see how long we can stay there, but it's also good to sort of choose to come down rather than falling out, rather than staying there until we have no choice left. Give your legs a shake out, and we'll do side 2. So again, yes, if you don't have to, if you're not taking your foot right up onto your top of your thigh, you can bring your hands into the lotus bud at the beginning. If you're going to use your hand to catch your ankle, then obviously you need to do that first. And then we bring our hands into this lovely bud shape. You can have a few breaths here, just this sense of settling, of feeling the contact of the bases of our palms, the thumbs, perhaps the little finger pads, maybe the pads of the other fingers. Good. The contact of the hands resting on the breastbone. And then from here, we can have that sense of the bud opening, this growing upwards, growing our branches into tree. Feeling awake and alert and alive from our heel to our toes. Also soft and relaxed in the shoulders. Very nice. And as we might gather the hands back into that beautiful bud at the heart. Really let the shoulders soften. Good. Very nice. Amazing. Yes, really amazing balancing on side 2. Well done. It's really lovely. Now, this is why I have to make some decisions about my my over enthusiasm about how much we could fit in. Let's come into a forward bend here with our feet a little wider apart. So take your feet, if you're standing facing the short edge of your mat, take your feet as wide as the narrow edge of your mat. And then see how it feels to come into a forward bend with your feet this distance apart. Sinking into your heels, releasing your head and your arms to the ground. Or it can be nice in this one, and I really like it, is to bend my knees and rest my elbows on my thighs. And then I might release my arms to the ground and feel very rooted into the heels. A couple of big exhalations. And then sinking down into the heels, rolling back up into standing. And keep your feet this distance apart when you arrive in standing. And then come into these side lengthening movements where we're taking one arm up. We can be shifting our pelvis towards the raised arm side and the other arm's heavy and floppy. And we can move from side to side, or we can stay for a couple of breaths. We're just going to do a few things where we're coming to this feeling of lengthening through the sides of the body. So it's a little bit like our tail wagging, but there's a little bit more of a sort of stretch going on here through one side. Good. And what we can notice in these sometimes is just how different one side of our body can feel to the others. It might be the shoulders, it might be tightness around the hip. Good. Okay. Make sure you sort of vaguely balance yourselves out. And then give your feet a little shake out. And we're going to then take our feet a little bit wider apart. Okay. A bit wider than they were. And we're going to turn one foot out a bit. It doesn't have to turn all the way out and line up with the mat. Turn it out a little bit. And we're going to bend that knee. And the most important thing here is our knee is in line with our foot. So we've got, that's it. We've got our feet maybe slightly wider apart, Sarah, at this point. I think you could have your feet, you could have your feet slightly wider apart because you've got quite long legs. That's it, good. So we're trying to, at this point, feel very steady below the waist, very planted. And we can float our arms up at shoulder height, this sort of warrior type pose. The arms are floating, we look forwards. So forwards is the bent leg arm towards the sort of middle finger of that arm. And we just see if we can have that contrast of being very steady and planted below the waist and then these sort of soft, floaty arms. And then from here, we start to lean towards the bent leg, rest the elbow down on that thigh, and then the top arm reaches over. So we come again into a side lengthening movement. That's it, good. Very nice. So reaching into your fingertips and just have a couple of breaths here. And again, just trying to feel very planted below the waist, very steady. And then as you exhale, sink down, come back up. And you're going to turn the foot that was turned out, turn it back to face forwards and turn the other foot out. And then we bend that knee, okay? And again, so we've got this front knee. Remember the knee is in line with the foot. We're bending that knee. We're trying to feel very planted below the waist. Float the arms up to shoulder height. Very nice. Dropping the shoulders, maybe looking forwards along that middle finger if you like, for a breath or two, steady below the waist. And then we start to lean, so we bring our elbow down to rest on our bent leg thigh, and we reach the other arm over. Good. And again, just feeling long through that one side of the body, steady below the waist. Planted through the legs, good. Very nice. And then from here, sinking down, coming back upright, turning both feet, well, the foot that turned out, turn it straight forwards, and then we'll fold forwards into a forward bend here. So exhaling, both feet pointing forwards, come into a wide forward bend. And just, yes, see how this feels. Letting your head go, feeling rooted into your heels. And you've got different options with your hands here. I can see some of you with your hands on your ankles, which is nice. You can hold your elbows. You can rest your hands down onto the floor if they touch. So just, yeah, whatever feels helpful for you. Yes, and exactly, Rosie, if you want to sort of do a bit of shifting from side to side, bending one knee, bending the other, you can do. Very nice. Equally, when you've had enough of your legs being wide, you're going to stay in your forward bend, but you're going to walk your feet in towards each other so they're a bit closer together. Into a sort of like a normal forward bend. Yeah, what I would say, which I try to say too much these days, hip width apart. So you're still in a forward bend, and then you're going to start to bend your knees more. So they bend straight forwards over your feet. You're coming down into a squat, and it's fine if your heels come up. Yeah. So Aditi, you might want your feet a bit closer together. I know you can have your feet closer together for a squat, yes. Good. And we're just using this squat to, if we bring our hands on the floor behind us, to bring ourselves back down into Cobbler Pose. Okay. And so just before we lie down, I wanted us to, we'll go a little bit further with this sequence we were doing earlier. So from Cobbler Pose, we'll come back into pinwheel. You can do a little bit of circling here, see how it feels. And from pinwheel, we'll go on into pigeon this time. So rather than folding over our leg in pinwheel, we're going to take this leg back into pigeons. So pinwheel, we can slide this knee back a little bit. We can then lean our weight over this leg, lengthen out the back leg. Okay, and at this point, if you can stay a bit lopsided in your pigeon if that's better for your front knee, or you can roll your pelvis over. So we're coming into our pigeon pose. We're trying to feel, which we're all sort of experts on by now, that our pelvis is level. Pigeon, good. So we've lengthened out the back leg. So a good place to start in pigeon is on your elbows. And if from that point you want to go lower, you can do. If from that point you want to go higher, you can do. Good. So have a few breaths in your pigeon pose on your elbows. If you want to try walking your hands in a little bit, you can do. If you want to try folding down a little bit lower, yes, Rosie, if you want to try bending your back knee, you absolutely can do that. So any of your pigeon pose variations, but it might just be being in pigeon pose and having a few quiet breaths. And what actually can be helpful in pigeon pose, which we'll do now, is if we can bear to be here for a couple more breaths, we'll have a couple of buzzing breaths just to help us settle. So be in a place where you can feel as comfortable as possible, maybe with your elbows on the ground. Let a breath come in. If you've had enough pigeon pose, do you feel that you can roll out onto your front leg hip? If you can stay there for another buzzing breath, then let a breath come in. Good, and then do roll out onto your front leg hip and just maybe let your legs be long for a moment. So they can be long and close together, or if you like your legs being long and wide, particularly after we were just doing that in standing, you can do that. Okay, but yeah, lean back onto your arms, make it easy. And then we can come back to Cobbler Pose. So we're coming into Pigeon Pose on the other side. So if we come into this side sitting, slide the top leg back. So we're in pinwheel. But to move from pigeon, we need to let this knee come back a little bit if we can. Slide that leg back and then lean our weight over the front leg. And that gives us a chance maybe to lengthen the back leg out, tucking the toe under, sort of walking that back leg back. And then at this point, we can stay with our weight more over the front leg hip, or we can let our pelvis roll. So possibly the top of the front leg thigh comes off the floor. That's really up to you. And then be in a place where you can settle. So it could be on your elbows, it could be folding a bit lower. So like you might bring your forehead to the ground or your forehead to rest on the back of your hands. And you can also try and see what it's like to come up a bit by walking your hands in towards you. So these are all your possibilities. And obviously a bit of rocking in pigeon can be helpful. But yes, if your front knee is feeling pressure, make sure you're rocking your weight onto the top of your front leg thigh. We'll have a couple of buzzing breaths now. So again, try and be in a place in pigeon where it feels comfortable. If it's really not comfortable, you could always be in pinwheel instead. So let a breath come in. And again. And then, yes, rolling onto your front leg hip. And again, lengthen your legs out in front of you, either together or wide, just depending on what you feel like doing now. So we're going to finish off now lying down, revisiting some of the movements we did right at the beginning and seeing how they feel now. Yeah, so if you want to put anything warmer on, you could put socks on or have them socks and blanket nearby. So when you arrive on your back, so you don't have to remember what we did at the start, I will talk you through. When you arrive on your back, if you lie with your knees bent and your feet standing on the floor. And I always find this, it's so nice to lie down, and that's it, yeah, it's so nice to lie down and just arrive after all that movement. It's good. And the first I can see remembering was that tilting your knees to the right and to the left. You can see, lovely, yeah, you can see how that feels. Very nice. And then you can pause in the center. And then if you remember, the second movement was tipping your pelvis up and down. So it's this movement, it's a little bit like we're doing cat pose on our back. So we're tipping our pelvis towards our head. We feel our lower back flatten out. We're tipping our pelvis away from our head. We feel our lower back arch away from the floor a little bit. So do this movement a few times, see how it feels. And then from here, you're going to take it on into bridge pose, into what we did at the beginning, which was just a very sort of fluid rolling up and down, not necessarily trying to go particularly far, unless it feels very easy. And so how does it feel to pick the pelvis and some of the spine up off the floor? How does it feel to place them back down again? So again, thinking about it as a movement, this sort of the spine rolling up, rolling back down again. 2, 3 times. When you've done that 2 or 3 times, you might like to fold your knees into your chest. Hold around the top of your knees. Do a little bit of rocking from side to side. Oh, yes, that's it. So you do a little bit of rocking from side to side. That's nice. You can also take your legs up to the ceiling and give them a shake out. Add the arms in if you like. Good. Or if you prefer, you can take your legs down onto the ground and lengthen your legs out on the ground and give them a bit of a roll and bounce your knees. Might also feel very nice. Lovely. So you're going to settle down now. So now is the time, if you wish, to put on socks or a blanket. We're going to just have maybe, I think, 3 more cycles of buzzing breath, lying down to help us settle. So it might be helpful when you are settling down, once you've got your blanket or socks or whatever it is to then rest your hands on the front of your body. And start by gathering your attention into your natural breath. So feeling your body responding to the in-breath and to the out-breath as they move through you. And then we're going to let a breath come in and we'll make our buzzing sound on the out breath. It can be very gentle and quiet, whatever you like. So let the breath come in. Just settle for a moment before we do the next buzzing breath. Let a breath come in, let a breath leave you. And then once again, let a breath come in. We'll make our buzzing sound on the exhalation. Again, a couple of quiet breaths, and then we'll have one last buzzing breath. So letting your breath come in. And then just settling down, feeling the flow of your natural breath through your body. I'll just let you lie quietly for another minute or so, and then I'll be ringing the singing bowl 3 times. So thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rosie.